Welcome, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's presentation of the Master's Series program. My name is Aileen Novick, and I'm the Manager of Public and Education Programs. I'd ask you all just to mute yourselves now. We will have time for questions and comments with our presenter at the end, but that way we don't have any interference. One announcement is tomorrow is a big day at the Worcester Art Museum with our virtual give-a-thon. So you can follow all day long on our social media. There'll be all different presentations. You know, there's a docent talk, an arms and armor panel, a preview of an exhibition upcoming. So please make sure you check that out. And we hope you'll consider making a donation for the give-a-thon. Tonight's Master Series is presented by Worcester Art Museum's Member Council, and the council works to create a sense of community among the museum's members, including hosting this Master Series. So I'm thrilled to welcome you on their behalf. We are recording this program, and we thank you for attending it. And I'd like you to help me thank our lead sponsor this year for the Master Series, again, is AbbVie. And our Master Series lectures usually focus on permanent works in the museum's collection. And tonight we focus on a very permanent feature, the building itself of the Worcester Art Museum. This is a building comprised of many parts created at different times. And tonight we will be looking at the future of the Worcester Art Museum, and specifically the work currently underway at the Lancaster Plaza. A lot of you have seen our construction fence up and might want to know what's going on behind it, and this will be a great preview for you. To share this project with us, we're pleased to have Seth Wiseman. Seth is a familiar face around the Worcester Art Museum as he works to keep all the museum staff updated on construction projects here and really helps with the design. He's the owner and project manager of Conform Lab. He studied building science and industrial design at Appalachian State University and minored in sustainable development. After working in the architectural industry in New York City, Seth completed a Master of Architecture degree at the Rhode Island School of Design. He's worked in a variety of capacities within the building and design industry over the course of his career. He likes working and designing at various scales. And you'll see from his presentation, Seth seeks to uncover a unique logic for each project. And that is really what he's going to present about tonight, is the unique logic behind this new renovation at the Worcester Art Museum. So now I hand it over to Seth.
Thanks, Aileen. Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you tonight, albeit virtually. Just stepping forward from this rendering, which is one of the early renderings on the project. I just want to give you a little outline of tonight's talk. So of course, the introduction. I'd like to start by stepping back a little bit, not too long ago, maybe 2016 or so, just to give you a better understanding of the work that was underway several years ago related to master planning, and then how that got us to the Lancaster Plaza project. And then as we wrap up, give you just a little tidbit of what's coming. And it's likely not as much as you'd like to hear, but at least it'll give you a little better understanding. So back in 2016, maybe late 2015, for those that were members of the museum or attended the museum back at that time, the museum had worked on the Salisbury Bridge, working with Y Architecture to promote accessibility at the Salisbury entrance into Renaissance Court, of course. Following that project, which was really my introductory project, I came in at the tail end of the Salisbury Bridge project just to help facilitate and get that to completion. Moving on from the Salisbury Bridge, WAM worked with Y to begin to undertake a campus master plan. So based on the experience with the Salisbury Bridge, the leadership team saw a need to begin to step back and try to set up a benchmark for the years to come. And one of the great questions that Kulipat Yantrasast at Y asked was, how do museums grow? In the context of the Worcester Art Museum, what Kulipat was really looking for from an intervention standpoint was acupuncture architecture. So really not looking at large interventions, but beginning to understand and wrap his head around some of the problems that plagued the guest experience, which is what we were talking about earlier on for those that were on the Zoom call. Of course, as we look at the Worcester Art Museum over the decades, this is how the Worcester Art Museum has grown, right? Matthias has in past referred to it as a New England farmhouse, right? Because it grows as it's needed to over time. And as I mentioned at the start of the call, really one of the problems that the museum has seen over time is working with the slope or the topography of the site. So, of course, the 1898 building, the core of the building, which you saw on the previous slide here, really is the center point for the museum. But as it's grown and changed over time, access to the core museum has shifted, which becomes a problem for the guests and for staff on a day-to-day basis. So what we did early on is try to work to resolve one of the primary concerns. And here are some of the challenges that we identified. So entry and circulation, of course. When we think about circulation on a design or architectural or from a design or architectural standpoint, we're not only thinking about the horizontal movement, but of course we're thinking about the vertical movement for users of all needs. Also looking at the collection and care of art. So obviously if people have trouble moving around, large works of art also are challenging to move on a day-to-day basis. For those that have visited the museum and had the opportunity to see the basement or sub-basement, you know that that's even more problematic. And so there are large inclines, large slopes, all of which the campus master plan began to identify and then work to remedy. So, of course, parking, as we mentioned at the start of the call, is a part of the user experience that is of a huge concern. If you go to the museum for an event or an opening and you can't find parking, where do you go? Oftentimes, or sometimes you go home, right? So parking becomes part of that initial step in the guest experience that the master plan early on tried to resolve. So, of course, the sustainability of the museum is an important aspect as well. And so trying to look at programmatic opportunities, so the library, the cafe, events, catering, etc., as ways to help support the sustainability and longevity of the museum. And then the building and the landscape, really what you see if we move back, we've really begun to close off the museum and access from the exterior. And so one of the opportunities that the building offers is how do we literally begin to break down the walls of the museum as we move forward. So I think one of the great aspects of the work that Y did in 2016 is try to, again, conceptually break down the walls of the museum from the site and begin to consider how the museum relates to its neighbors. And a number of the conversations that we had during that time period worked with constituents across town. So WPI, of course, that conversation has continued. Now with the facilities committee in place, we have a member of their team that sits on that committee to assist in governing the work. At that time, we were also talking with Trinity, of course, direct adjacency, and beginning to understand how those three in particular might work on the parking solution. So I think present day, we haven't quite found that solution, but that is certainly something that's still on the list. More importantly, what you're seeing here is that we're beginning to weave in, or at least that was the goal in that master plan, weave art into the experience, not only on the campus of the museum, but throughout the cultural district. And I think that is, as we look forward, one of the great opportunities that the museum might push forward. So now if we localize and begin to kind of look at the museum and think about that undulating topography, you can begin to understand, and of course your own experiences support this, that trying to move vertically in the museum is incredibly problematic. So if we think about a typical day at the museum pre-COVID, we would enter at Lancaster, come into the lobby. If you were ticketed, then you'd progress through the cafe and then back around, and you're greeted by a set of stairs, whether you go up or go down. Or if you kind of slide to your left, you enter into a very small, very narrow, and sometimes very slow elevator. All of these things began to kind of synthesize an opportunity really at the front of the museum at Lancaster, the main entry. And part of what this diagram begins to underscore is the need for direct access into the museum. And really, at its root, what the master plan identified is two-part. One, that the lobby at Lancaster Street is challenging given the large set of stairs, but given the use of the Higgins Education Wing, the need for access is greater in duration than the access to the main museum, right? We have two different needs. The museum, which needs to be secured and locked down at a shorter interval of time, whereas the Higgins Education Wing has an expanded availability for education, programming, and classes. So one of the goals is this new elevator that's being installed at the Lancaster Plaza. One of the goals that we have yet to resolve, that we are seeking in the future, is some larger, centrally located elevator within the confines of the museum. That will help not only with the guest experience, but also help with the circulation of art. Because the spine here is intended to get all the way to the sub-basement. So we haven't realized that, as you'll see, moving forward with the Lancaster Plaza, but we have started the process to begin to improve the guest experience. So these are some of the diagrams that began to break down the very architectural in the context, but begin to break down what the master plan really was seeking to do. And again, developed in 2016 and presented to the Board of Trustees in early 2017. So you can see coming in right off of Lancaster, the floor plate aligns with what is now Matthias's office. So for those that know the museum well or have visited the administrative offices, that all falls right in here. You can envision that if you're parking the parking lot across the street, you come across at the crosswalk, and then ideally entering right into the museum at that point. If we move up a floor plate, this is kind of the area that we've begun working on. So the set of stairs here into the Lancaster lobby, and then of course through the cafe and into the museum. So you see that we've, in this effort, or what you will see as I present the Lancaster Plaza project, the kind of order of magnitude that the campus master plan began to identify. Beginning to create access right off of Lancaster Street, right into the heart of the museum. And at its root, that is really what the master plan offered. So now let's transition and begin to kind of move forward in time. So as we look into late 2018 and early 2019, we of course go through a New England winter cycle. And as the 2018-2019 winter closed, what became very evident is that the stairs were not going to make it through another winter cycle without a large investment in funding. And we had seen that on a fairly regular basis since the stair renovation occurred, which was completed in 2006. So at that time, the executive committee, because the facilities committee was not yet in place, the executive committee decided to forego a patch and repair job at the Lancaster stairs over the course of the summer of 2019 and push forward with an option that broke down a portion of the campus master plan into a more bite-sized parcel, so the Lancaster Plaza. The goals of the Lancaster Plaza were really to take that unsightly, unsafe structure and turn it into an opportunity. Of course, accessibility, already underscored at the Salisbury Bridge, was critical for the main entry to the museum. The Lancaster entry is the museum, or the entry that is most used on campus. And so it seemed very necessary to make accessibility a large parameter of the project. And then, as I already mentioned, access via Lancaster offers, access at Lancaster offers guests entrance into the museum, as well as entrance into the Higgins Education Wing, which, as I mentioned, has two different needs or time cycles. Of course, all of this is in the context of the very significant gift from the McDonough Foundation. And really, that gave us an opportunity to move the project forward rapidly. But the desire of the leadership team, given how quickly the group had to move, was to not invest all of that money immediately, but to, again, to make it a bite-sized project. So just before we close the Lancaster stair, this is what you were greeted with, right? The majority of the stairs were cordoned off. A number of the stairs were failing. You can kind of see here, these stairs had already been replaced. And for those of you that had used the stairs, I think you'll recall that it just wasn't a great site, and certainly it was unsafe. So I think June of 2019, we began looking at some of the options. And the options included kind of different iterations of removal of the stair. One was patch and repair, as I mentioned. The other was leaving some of the stairs in place and beginning to kind of take away some of the concrete while still doing some patch and repair, a slightly more modest budget. And then the third option was really to take the stairs away in earnest and level the plaza in an effort to seek the campus master plan vision, which is a single elevation. Again, if you know the museum well, this is the administrative offices. This is right on the other side of the Salisbury Court. So just down the stairs, so we're right on plane with the main floor of the museum. So again, just some architectural sketches that begin to conceptualize the project in the very early stages to try and wrap our heads around what the opportunities were. After receiving the information, leadership, along with the executive committee and working with the staff, began to identify what the project site might look like. And for those of you that kind of recall the stairs, just a huge monolith, really similar to the brutality of the 1968 Higgins Education Wing. But I think there's a difference between the brutality of the stairs and the brutalist movement of the Higgins Education Wing. And so really the work for the plaza began in the demo phase
No one else is
to
saying
help
anything.
conceptualize what the plaza might be in contrast to what the previous stairs were. So work began in November of 2019. We cordoned off the site just in time for winter. and began cutting away the stairs, which was quite an arduous process. One of the great benefits of the work, which I think this image highlights, is beginning to cut away that barrier between the 1898 building and the guests, right? So now what we're doing is we're removing this literal wall between what was once there and still exists, but what we can no longer see. And then as the wall is really torn down. So as design was moving forward, and again, the goal was to compress this project, given that this is the main entry into the museum, and delivered in a more timely manner than a more typical design process. Of course, January 2020, the coronavirus it's on the other side of the planet at that point. So we didn't quite understand the impacts to the project timeline. So this is one of the early kind of design drawings where we're beginning to kind of conceptualize how the assembly of the plaza might work out. And the gestural move towards the parking lot here, as well as opening up to the accessible parking spaces down at Salisbury. So understanding that people might be using both Salisbury and the Lancaster Plaza interchangeably. Importantly, what you see in this sketch is the two means of entry into the museum. So, of course, the need to maintain some sort of set of stairs to negotiate between the different topography between the Lancaster lobby and Lancaster Street. And then tucked in between the collar of the Higgins Education Building and the 1898 building, a modest elevator that can get guests from Lancaster Plaza up to the Lancaster lobby, as well as up to the second floor of the Higgins Education Wing. So in line with that sketch, you're beginning to see, as we move from kind of paper drawing and sketches into 3D models, and beginning to work to understand from the opening drawing, or the opening rendering rather, what you see is the topography is coming in. So really the parameters of the project are becoming more real as we're negotiating with what the assembly might look like. Now the assembly is beginning to take on different material qualities. And I think material qualities were a big driver initially because of the experience with the previous set of stairs, right? A set of stairs that was only 15 years old. 2006 was the origin or the completion of the previous stairs. And I will note that the stairs were modified in 2006, so it wasn't the entirety of that assembly. But the concern from the museum standpoint is, what can we invest in that gives us longevity? And that, importantly, was an aspect that was really mulled over with the stairs, the new stairs. And so, as you'll see in the forthcoming rendering, really stone seemed like the best solution for the stairs rather than cast concrete. Also, in an effort to blend this stair, or at least nod to the Salisbury Bridge, beginning to use a similar material palette. So pavers at the sidewalk, a bronze tone railing, and then beginning to figure out how to negotiate the 1968 building with the traditional 1898 building. I think from the design standpoint, that was one of the real challenges of the elevator, is that we're negotiating these very different aesthetics with this very contemporary addition. So I'll be curious to hear what you think and how that's resolved from the rendering standpoint. So here is one of the technical architectural drawings This is kind of present day. So you're again looking from the top down, the stairs here into the, this is actually the machine room. So if I step back here, one of the aspects that you wouldn't realize is that actually under this landing, and I'll step back a couple of images here. So of course, the underside of this landing, which is right here, also right here, was backfilled space. So it's unrealized space from the museum perspective. We knew that going in, but we anticipated, again, leaning on the master plan, we anticipated that space might be recaptured for future use and planned to put the machine room in the basement. But in negotiating with staff, specifically museum services, it became important to maintain the footprint in the basement and try to develop new space. So what we were able to do is actually build out a single wall. We dropped the floor plate because the floor plate in the lower level is slightly lower than the plaza. And we were able to carve into that space to create the machine room. So, which is directly adjacent to the staff lounge. The benefit is that both the elevator shaft and the machine room are all new space for the museum. So again, thinking back to why strategic kind of concept, acupuncture architecture, bite-sized steps for very high impact. The stairs, the elevator, and really the plaza are the three primary components that the guests will experience. The machine room is one of those that is kind of behind the site, a bit behind the scenes and out of sight, out of mind. Certainly one of the important qualities of the project is how guests experience the plaza at night. And what we've been working on of late is really beginning to figure out what the experience is from a lighting standpoint. And I think in our negotiation and discussion with Worcester Historic and the planning department, they've encouraged the museum to really highlight the 1898 building. So we're working to tie that into a scheme at the Salisbury Bridge as well, and then have some additional lighting. So for those that have walked the Salisbury Bridge, we're going to have a similar handrail light in the on the stairs. We're not going to do the in-ground paving lights at the pavers, and we're still working to coordinate the finish assembly at the sidewalk. But you can see the kind of gestural quality that's represented in the rendering in these more technical drawings. So here's how the project has unfolded, and I should note I've kind of skipped over the whole COVID impact. So in March of last year, I received a phone call from Mark Sparia, the CFO, and he said, we need to put everything on hold. And of course, it's hard to hear because we had some great momentum and everything was really in line to move forward. But of course, hindsight, we better understand why that call needed to be made. And I think it was a necessary call. Certainly that delayed the project. And when we picked things back up about August 1st, material prices had begun to escalate. So a lot of our initial work in jumpstarting the project in August and into September, and actually as middle of July and into August, was looking at the numbers and working on matching the vision with the budget. So we saw yet another couple of months of delay to that. And then by November, a year later, we were back to construction. The Kaplan team was back on site. So these images here kind of underscore the work that we've executed to date. One of the interesting outcomes of the excavation work was finding granite slabs from the old retaining wall just prior to the Higgins Education Wing. So when the 1898 building was installed, kind of across the mouth of the 1898 building, there used to be a retaining wall, granite retaining wall. And so when the Education Wing was built, of course, that retaining wall was demolished and then the remnants discarded into the site. So that's one of those, from a planning perspective, one of those things that you can't always account for, that we had to pull out of the site. Here in the middle, this is where we're really getting into the kind of crux of modifying the building, cutting through the underside of the Higgins Education Wing landing directly into the staff lounge. You can kind of see how monolithic that concrete is. And then this is where the new work really begins, where we're setting new formwork for the stairs. Certainly you can begin to see how we take an orthogonal building assembly, such as concrete formwork, and it begins to start making that gestural movement to the kind of round stair that you'll see. And then certainly for me, as we're beginning to tie back into that 1898 building with this new modern assembly, that to me was a really kind of important part of the project, because Historic, as they evaluated the project, really had no question about this move. In fact, what they said is it's about time, because they see accessibility as an important aspect of a modern facility. And so there was really no questions about the modification to the 1898 building in an effort to get the elevator in place. So the last image here really is about a week old. So we're at the point where we've topped out on the masonry structure. The elevator cab is now on site, and the work of installing the cab and the stairs is really in the works. As I mentioned, the steels are clad in granite. We had worked to try and work out or design a system where it was really kind of true to the material. And I think we've blended modern making with the capacity of granite. So this is the superstructure of the stair. Again, beginning to translate from orthogonal to curved. And the kind of great part from my vantage as an architect is the ability of the granite to span. So we're actually using the material. It's not just a cladding. We're using the material for its intended purpose. But the goal is to make the stair still light. We're bringing light under the stair, similar to the Salisbury Bridge, again, as a nod to Salisbury. So there'll be a little bit of lighting under there, mood lighting, also good security. And then the images on the right are from the fabricator as of earlier this week. So the system will be galvanized and then painted, and then hopefully put in place the first or second week of April. And I think this is probably what most of you have been waiting on. This is the final rendering of the Lancaster Plaza as of January of this year. So again, you're beginning to understand how we moved from concept through the various architectural phases into the final vision, blending and nodding to the Salisbury Court, while using some new materials, including the granite. Certainly this cladding system tries to blend between the Brutalist building as well as the 1898 building. One of the important aspects of the elevator shaft is the vestibule. So certainly we're kind of considering the guest in that moment where the guest pushes the button and begins entry into the museum. And thinking back to the master planning process, again, this step was just that. It was a step towards the lobby. I think the reality is, given what the museum is facing from a deferred maintenance standpoint, we've come to the realization in the last few months that lobby may be further afield. As a result, we've made some adjustments in the implementation process that ensures that the guest experience is much improved to the previous entry sequence. So I think this vestibule is that move, as are some of the selections and materials. I'll come back to this, and I'll be curious to hear what you guys think. So looking forward, as I just mentioned, really what the museum is facing is a long list of deferred maintenance. Decades of deferred maintenance. And I think that work, and although it's been challenging for the leadership team, they are on board for tackling the deferred maintenance. Then, of course, as most of you know, the Arms and Armor collection is a very important aspect to the museum and really achieving that goal. So as we look to some of the future work, this is really just a very short list. Two of the items, the Higgins Education Wing window and skylight replacement, and then the 1930s building and conservation lab envelope improvements, are work that you'll likely to hear about or see in the next 12 to 16 months. And then the Arms and Armor gallery is a little bit further afield. And there's certainly work that will occur in between. And hopefully, as you stay engaged and involved, you'll hear more about that work. I'll step forward just a little bit and just give you a little bite-sized taste of the Arms and Armor. The Arms and Armor gallery is really at the concept level. We're transitioning into schematic at this point. For those that are aware, the Arms and Armor landing spot is the existing library and the adjacent gallery. So the contemporary gallery, or temporary gallery, excuse me. What you may not be aware of is there's a little storage space here. So if you're in the temporary gallery, you may not actually identify this space. But really the goal of the Arms and Armor project is to, coming out off of Salisbury Hall, is to connect those two spaces at the elevator, which is the largest elevator. So just for reference, this is the 1898 building. This is 1983, so Tuckerman Street is here. So coming out off of Salisbury Court, entering the main gallery, and then moving forward into an open storage gallery. And for those that were part of the call early on, the work that's underway now is the feasibility study for the building, the base building, which includes the building envelope, and then also an evaluation, kind of a piece-by-piece evaluation of the collection to really understand the constraints and parameters of each one of those pieces of art and how they're going to be deployed in the Arms and Armor gallery. So with that, the goal for the Lancaster Plaza project is to complete that project in time for the baseball exhibition. So our current date, and we get weekly updates from the contractor, we're slated for completion on the 28th of May for substantial completion. So what you may see if you come visit for the baseball exhibition is what the industry refers to as punch list items. But the goal is really to have people entering the building, using the elevator, and enjoying the Lancaster Plaza for the baseball exhibition. And with that, I'll take questions. And I'm going to zoom back to the rendering.
Yes, so if you have a question, you can raise your participant hand, or you can unmute yourself or use the chat. We'd love to hear your questions.
Yes, Paul Mahan. I have a question and a concern. I see it's copying the Salisbury Bridge with those upright staves. Those things are very sharp edged at the top, and I've been concerned, so hopefully nothing's happened yet, but I've been concerned at the bridge that somebody slipped and fell and hit their head on one of those. It would be disastrous. Is there any way of cushioning that a little bit or doing something to protect people?
Yes, so the corners of the stock should be rounded. So if you think about a wood trim, so you have a kind of a broken edge. So these are likely to be a rounded kind of 1/8 inch round bar stock. Well, so the stock is 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch, but the corners will be rounded to help mitigate some of those concerns.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, that will help. Also, I've noticed that the bridge is already deteriorating badly. Most of the lights are out, and some of them are destroyed, and there are a lot of broken tiles, and that's going to start posing a problem very, very soon.
Yep, and I know that Fran Pedoni, Director of Facilities, is aware of the broken lights, and that's something he's working to remedy at the Salisbury Bridge. And certainly one of the reasons why he has pushed for no in-grade lighting for this project.
That's good. As far as circulation is concerned, by the way, one of my pet peeves for a long time is we give even handouts to visitors that have numbers on the galleries on them, and they're looking for gallery 206 or gallery 209, and none of the galleries are numbered. Do you know if that's being looked at all and seriously?
Well, Paul, I totally agree with you. I think one of my pet peeves too is that the signage is a problem. So that is on the list of something to tackle. But also the numbering, there's some redundancy in the numbering. So I think we need to work to remedy that as well. One of the important aspects about the elevator is that we're working to clarify the levels, so calling things by level versus Higgins floor 1 and Main Museum floor 2, things like that, to begin to standardize terminology to improve experience. So it's point well taken.
And my last comment is here, at least at this picture, it looks like you can walk in front of the steps and go over to the elevator. Because I was wondering, in some of the pictures, it doesn't look like there's any access to the elevator. The stairs look like they go right up to the wall. It's maybe a perspective thing, but is that going to be where that woman is walking at the bottom with the black bag? Looks like a little tiny space there. Anyway, is that where you'll go to get to the elevator?
It is. It's actually much larger than you.
Okay.
In this perspective. Yep.
There are two questions in the chat, Seth. The first one is, do we lose the coat closet in that entrance on Lancaster?
So that's a great question. And at this time, the coat closet is not going to be lost. I think one of the important aspects of this is that the project, as you looked at the demolition diagram, really focused on the exterior. But what the leadership team and staff are working on now is how what experience changes when you move into the museum. And I think when we think about accessibility, for those that have been in the coat room, the cubbies are overhead and the hooks are kind of 5 feet off the ground. So there's going to be work, though it may not be at by the baseball opening, to improve that space. Certainly a coat closet is of utmost concern, and if that space is lost, it will be relocated proximal to the lobby.
Lee, do you have a question?
Actually, I just wanted to echo what the last person has said, is that being over at the Hanover Theater, I think my biggest beef, just to be sharing, is that there is no coat check. And it's problematic because so much of their programming brings you indoors during the season when a lot of us love to go to the Worcester Art Museum too. So I'm thrilled to hear that you recognize the need for the member experience to have a coat check, closeting kind of an area. So I think that's, again, continuing to kind of think about the member experience as they're coming in. It's been valuable, and the people who actually have been staffing that have been really wonderful, gracious in terms of directing us to places we need to go to. On that same vein, in terms of like where to go in the museum, I've always felt, quite honestly, that the 4 levels are human scale. I've loved it compared to other museums that I've gone to. So I personally haven't found it confusing or getting lost, but I do think, again, that any kind of attempt to, which is all positive, to identify where things are in the museum should always just be from the member experience, from the guest experience. I wouldn't personally relate to floor 3, but I love it right now because it kind of seems to be a logical, almost like moving up through the civilizations, if you will. So anyway, I am pleased that, again, there's a lot of great focus and considerations being taken on the member experience when our guests enter into the facility. The exterior seems beautifully inviting. I just would like to make sure that we're also looking at the member experience interior. Thank you.
Wayfinding is definitely on the list. And I think wayfinding gets into branding. And so that is, all of those components are on the list. It's a matter of when they're tackled. And I think wayfinding, certainly as a result of this project, as you step through the threshold into the lobby, is maybe forthcoming. It's just a matter of when.
Right. And a lot of what we're doing today, if you notice, is not so much numeric and verbal, but so much of what we're doing is more a European model, which is icon based. So I would just put that out because, again, we tend to always kind of default to what we're comfortable with, like let's number it. But again, if you look at, countries that are very diverse with diverse populations like we have within Worcester, and want to encourage to come to the Worcester Art Museum from all parts of the United States and the world, for the collection we have, we want to make sure that we have information that is universally accessible. Mm-hmm. So again, moving towards what is more an international way to communicate things is something that would be, kind of unique and kind of very cool to introduce at the Worcester Art Museum, right? Getting into more of an international way of expressing where things are. A challenge, but very fun, I think.
To be honest, and we haven't resolved this yet for the restrooms. I think we were working on that as well, because also trying to find restrooms, when you tie that into guest experience, try to tie it into wayfinding and circulating the museum. And if that's not a number, but a visual, it's much easier to find.
Exactly. And for children and anybody of all ages and backgrounds and cultures, and whether you're a first year immigrant or a 4th generation immigrant, it's nice to know that visually you can kind of see. So anyway, I just share that to kind of emphasize what other people have said.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee.
You have the question of what plant material will be used on the exterior.
That's a great question. So we're working on that now, and actually working with Lisa McDonough and Tower Hill. We're engaging with them to see what our options are. I think there's been some desire to maybe move away from the monkey grass, which is shown in the rendering, and which was used at the Salisbury Bridge. So we're working on that now. There is a desire to incorporate a tree in the green space just to the south of the stair. So that'll be a new addition.
Russ notes the old stairs have been used as a makeshift stage in years past. Do we have something like that in the new plans?
Not for the Lancaster Plaza.
And then I think they're referring to, you have the Kandinsky up here, and there had been the Page Boy mural in the other one. Do you all have any plans on what will be shown outside there?
Certainly there, as far as the banner goes, Julianne and the marketing team are working on kind of the next steps there. The other thing that I neglected to mention is that we're incorporating the potential for art within the plaza in the green spaces. So there are points of connection, electrical connection in the lawn, whether that's for art or other programmatic spaces or uses.
That's exciting. Do we have any other questions?
I have a long-term question. Realistically, how far away do you think we are from opening up Lancaster lobby, so possibly the cafe and shop is right where the guests would go in, and then maybe what is the cafe right now would be something else, like a meeting spot? Or how far away are we from that?
So certainly as a result of the Lancaster Plaza and the realities of deferred maintenance and pushing a future new lobby further out, the leadership team is grappling with that now to try and work through what a refresh of the lobby, the existing lobby might be, if that might include a refresh of the cafe or some sort of other iteration of that. The other thing that I mentioned in terms of future work, which is forthcoming later this year, is replacement of all of the Higgins Education Wing windows. So now we're coming at it from that vantage as well. So we're working from kind of two axes on the campus, all culminating at the lobby. So it makes sense to do some work there in the near term. And I think near term, looking at 12 to 24 months.
Sorry, one more difficult question to address, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The mosaic in the Renaissance Court, realistically, how likely do you are to think it could be moved, and how long out would that be? Well,
I think anything can be moved. It's just a matter of how much appetite there is from a guest perspective, and then appetite translates into money too. So certainly that is a component of the campus that has been discussed continually since the master plan. At this point, there's no specific date or timeline, nor relocation spot for the mosaic. So I think for the foreseeable future, until there's more work done on that project, there's no plan to move that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to just share, Sandra, I think your points are really well taken. So thank you for raising those, because again, looking at a holistic experience for people coming in, I think, again, making sure that there is kind of an integrated space where you can actually, after you experience the museum, you can shop, you can socialize, you can have some good food. That is an important aspect of the new guest experience these days. And unfortunately, in the current layout, everything is quite distributed. A critical kind of piece of territory there is taken up centrally. So I think it's a good conversation to have. And thank you, Sandra, for raising it.
And Sandra, of course, is a member of the staff, and so she gets to hear some of the conversations that are ongoing. And certainly the cafe and the sequence from the cafe to the shop, right? Those are at two different ends of the spectrum from a museum experience standpoint. Those are problematic. The number of restrooms, where the restrooms are located, that's a problem. So that's all work that's on a list. And what we're trying to do is figure out strategically how to integrate that to improve the guest experience. And then once we've identified where it goes, when we can actually implement it. Again, thinking about kind of bite-sized changes in an acupuncture fashion, because what we want to be able to do is maintain guest access to the museum.
Sure.
And when we do this large scale, it grossly impacts the guest experience.
Right.
So we're working to kind of balance that as we move things forward.
It's just great to understand and know that everyone's sort of identifying these same issues, and we all understand it's a matter of implementation and being able to address it. with money and resources and time, and obviously keeping the accessibility of the museum available. So it's a great conversation. And I think it's great to hear we're all on the same page.
Thanks.
Any final questions or comments? Well, we really appreciate your time tonight, Seth. I think this has been a really unique Master Series experience of looking at the museum itself, which is different for us. So I think that's a fun topic.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun. It's certainly, as I've been in the trenches with this project for several months now, after restarting, it's exciting to be very close to the end. So excited for people to actually occupy and use the space.
Yes. And for those joining us again in April, on April 15th, we will have our Master Series talk will be related to our current exhibition of kimono in print, 300 years of Japanese design. We'll be welcoming Monica Bazink from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and she'll be speaking about kimono fashion in Kyoto. So we hope you'll join us for that. And we have an additional program in March for that exhibition, which is The Art of Sushi, which will help you travel, with Chef Wilson Wang from Baba Sushi. And he'll be doing an evening presentation for us on March 30th, discussing how he creates sushi and giving a demonstration. So I think that will be a fun evening as well. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.